And so this argument isn't even valid, but you still have this very moralizing aspect of the welfare state as well.
Excuse me. When we talk about the welfare state, we talk about health, education, work, but surely welfare is more than a safety net, or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's welfare as a definition is about individual flourishing and well-being. It's quite an extensive definition if you watch the individual. I have a personal example. When we weren't able to get children, this was really a big cloud in our lives, and if it hadn't been solved, it would have been a tragedy for the rest of our lives, and is so for quite many people who are going through this. This is, of course, not being ill, and the healthcare is very reluctant to taking care of this. All you get here is vague promises and endless bureaucrocy, but not actual services. That would be better if the state just said, we're not going to touch this. You have to solve it on your own. That would mean, in practice, that a lot of years in just making do with the services, pretending, putting people up in line for treatments and so on. That would not take years from people, but of course that would anger big groups. So instead, you get the political promises. So that is a way. In that way, I mean, that meant a lot for our welfare. I'm not saying that the state should take responsibility for it. Of course not.
James?
Well, I mean, can I just respond to some of that? Because I guess I'd like to repose things slightly, not just in response to some of what you said earlier as an overweight smoker. I'm just really grateful that there's no chance of me getting pregnant. That seems to resolve the issue. I was just going to say, I don't think the problem is a financial one. And I think we should steer clear of understanding the problems of welfare in financial terms. I think if we really wanted to build a decent structure of welfare, we should be prepared to put the money up, and we should be prepared to work out how much it's going to cost us. So at the moment, in response to the economic recession, we have a huge number of arguments about the need to cut back on the welfare state because of economic recession. I think that's the wrong way of understanding the problems of welfare, because it assumes that we couldn't rejuvenate the economy and decide to prioritise welfare. So that for me is not the concern. The concern is a far broader one, I think, in terms of a remoulding of what a citizen is and what a citizen is able to do in their lives, and a remoulding of the relationship between states and citizens. I think what we see over the past couple of decades is a profound crisis of legitimacy amongst Western states. We no longer have any real vision for society. We no longer have any real political means of inspiring people and saying this is where we're going to take you to. And I think one response that's happened to that is a tendency for the state to intervene and to relate to people in their everyday lives in quite an unprecedented way. And the expansion of welfare and the understanding of what welfare is a very good example of that. The assumption that actually people cannot take control or take charge of any part of their lives. A couple of examples to me are very clear. One is Sure Start around childcare, which is a huge UK initiative and hugely popular. And as Matthias points out, it's not a party political issue. Everyone seems to be in support of Sure Start. One of the most radical and progressive demands, I think, of radical feminism was the provision of free, universally accessible childcare on demand, which was important from the understanding that actually we could give parents a chance to take charge of their parenting, to decide how they ran their lives, when they go to work, when they want to have the children looked after. Sure Start at one level seems to provide that. But actually when you look more deeply at the kind of underlying motivations for it, the assumption is far more that most of us as parents will screw up our children's lives. Most of us as parents will not parent correctly. And the result is that unless someone steps in to assist us in our parenting, to teach us how to parent well, and to actually take our children from us to socialise our children, then we're going to end up with a generation of broken children. So rather than actually saying, we can provide these services in order to free up adults to take greater charge of their lives, we assume not just that they can take charge of their lives, but if we leave them in control of their lives, they're going to screw up their children. And that actually becomes the motivation behind something like the Sure Start initiative. Similarly, when you look at measures around unemployment, you move from a recognition that actually, you know, the difficulties of market society are such that from time to time people lose work. And when you lose work, a decent society should help people out, right? Instead of that, what we now assume is that most people don't have the intellectual and psychological resources to be able to work. So rather than simply thinking we have to provide the material resources which they might need for a short amount of time, actually we start intervening to counsel them and to coach them and to try and save them from their own psychological limitations. And of course one result of that is that it's an ongoing process. You can never get out of that cycle of psychological dependency. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is it's not a financial issue. I'm not that concerned about people being financially dependent upon the state if what the state was able to provide for them was something decent. But actually it's a far more corrosive psychological kind of dependency which assumes and reproduces a state of vulnerability and incapacity amongst people and therefore takes them far further away from ever being able to control their lives.
Yeah, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, for the last 20 years, all investigation shows that when it comes to, when we talk about education, health, and so on,
It's going slowly down, no matter what kind of government we have. Does that mean that the politicians cannot affect the way the welfare state looks?
I believe that the politicians have an illness themselves in many ways. They want to have their fingers in everything, and as soon as they see a problem, they want to try to correct it a little bit and see what happens. And without getting the bigger perspective on the problem, actually they only change things on the closest level, and we see the effects of the changing maybe 20 years later. We can say, that was not so good. And I believe that both the problems that Brendan goes on and the problems that Matthias takes up, with the requests from the people, it has become like the politicians can solve all problems because that's what they do. And the politicians also believe that they can solve all the problems that comes up with a new law, with a new regulation, with a new authority, with some new ombudsman that's going to work on this subject. And the bureaucracy becomes bigger and bigger, and the wheel becomes bigger and bigger. And when the people then wants to reach out and get something from the welfare state, it becomes like this. But we don't want to pay for that, as Matthias said, or we want to have help on the financial level, but not on the psychological level. And with politicians that keeps promising that we can fix everything with new laws and regulations, it ends up, and it goes down because you actually don't go down on the bigger problem. You fix something on the surface.